All right, well, Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, good people. It is going to be a slightly chaotic start to the show. There is, let's call it a developing issue in my neighborhood right now, which I've now, maybe as an unwitting good Samaritan, inserted myself into it. But yeah, so it's a developing issue. I might have to call the show a bit earlier tonight, depending on how things pan out. But stuff it, we're here right now. This is the first episode of Liberty and Friends. That's right, your week-ending news roundup show here on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Welcome to it. My name is Sikhle Ngobese, a.k.a. Big Daddy Liberty. Welcome to it, guys. I see us trickling in so slowly in the viewer counter here, but a reminder, pardon me, as you do trickle in, hey man, hit that like button. Do it right now. Do it as you come in here. Remember, for every like that you hit, much like KFC, a child will be fed in Africa. Again, I'm not being specific as who that child is. It could be me. Very nice. But nonetheless, a child will be fed in this country. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. As usual on Liberty and Friends, I'm not alone. I'm here with a veritable who's who that revolves, that changes every week. My panelists, the friends, if you will, of Liberty and Friends. Tonight, we have a interesting panel. A face you haven't seen for quite a while, someone who you've been asking for to come back onto the show. I'm very glad to have him on. Who am I talking about, of course? Well, let me begin with him right now. That is Mpiyakhe Dlamini. There he is on screen. Mpiyakhe Dlamini. Boti, good evening. Welcome to LNF. Mpiyakhe, you're muted, my brother.
Oh, sorry about that. I was saying that I'm glad to be back. You can see it's been a while, but yeah, I'm glad to be back.
Dude, I know the feeling. I know the feeling when one is still in holiday mode with these sort of things. But welcome to it, Putti. Very good to have you on the show. You really have been someone the fans have been asking for, and we're happy to have you on. That's Mpiyakhe Dlamini, someone who I like to call an independent analyst and someone who is a columnist. You'll find his writing in various publications. I'll give him an opportunity at the end of the show to let you know how you can find his content. Another face who you guys have been asking, where he at? He is my go-to guy for all things self-defense and gun rights. A face who, hey man, I should say this at the onset, get used to seeing, especially as we prosecute that battle of ideas around our self-defense as the faith, flag, family, and freedom type society. Who am I talking about? Oh, there he is on the screen. Oh, Gideon, Joubert. Brother Gideon, good evening.
Good evening, Sishle, Mpiyakhe, the other panelists that you'll probably get introduced shortly, as well as every single viewer. Great to be back and to be here tonight. Look forward to it.
Excellent, brother. Good to have you on the show as usual. Speaking about, as usual, guys who you love to see on this platform, and really guys who you are ever increasingly finding on their platform. That's the Manpatria gentleman, of course. There he is, the host of the Manpatria show, Dumo. Denga. Dumo, good evening.
Good evening, Sikhle. Good evening to everyone else. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having another great discussion.
Absolutely, my brother. Good to have you on tonight's stream. And of course, the other third of the trio out at the Manpatria, guys, Koketso Resane. Koketso, good evening. Welcome to LNF.
Good evening, everyone. Great to be back. Yeah, I'm under pressure here. I'm surrounded by giants. So yeah, I'll try to keep up.
A tada fee 5-0 farm. Let's get this show going now that we have the giants in the house. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Our numbers have grown very nicely, but I'm seeing our likes are nowhere near where they should be. Remember, guys, keep that engagement over 50%. If there's 100 of us watching, let's get those 50 likes. Likes or dislikes, by the way. Hit that like button. Do it now. Do it now, do it now. Alrighty, guys, let's get into it. As usual on Liberty and Friends, we look at the news week that was, unpacking the things that made top headlines, the things that got us talking, got us gnashing our teeth, angry, sad, whatever you want to call it. But perhaps let me start, top of mind. And we won't spend too long on this one. You know, the Organization for Undoing Tax Abuse, that's AARTO, had taken the AARTO bill. That's the, actually, I can't think of its acronym right now. Let me just quickly look it up. But the AARTO law actually had been taken to court by AARTO. That's the Administrative Adjudication of Road Traffic Offences. Goodness me, government and its acronyms. But this piece of law basically introduced a whole myriad of things into the administration of traffic offences in the country, including, for example, that point system, which a lot of people did not understand what the use of, given the poor enforcement already currently of road traffic rules, would suddenly achieve in this instance. Another case of just ambitious legislation, but really rubbish legislation. Dumo, let me begin with you. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think that, you know, the bill itself was problematic. I've heard, I mean, I don't know if they wanted to include e-tolls in that as well. Like if you didn't pay your e-tolls, then that would also contribute to you negatively. So I just think for me, what this bill is trying to do really is just trying to get people to, cover up for the government's mess ups, where they just want to take e-tolls and everything like that, throw it into the bill, and then therefore they can force people to pay e-tolls and so forth. And also the demerit system also. I'm just thinking, let's say they actually implement it. Will they actually even have the resources to do so? Because I mean, I've seen with traffic fine systems as well, a lot of people are not getting their traffic fines, and a lot of people have actually been getting, they're not getting the stuff from the post office. So even if it does get, I know it didn't get signed off, but even if it did, what's the point? I think we'll still be at square one anyway. You're on mute.
Just to remind those viewers who might be wondering, you know, what are we talking about here? Well, basically this week, 3 days ago, in fact, the Pretoria Court, that's the Pretoria High Court, delivered its ruling on the constitutionality of this particular piece of legislation, declaring it actually unconstitutional. Now, my notes here, for whatever reason, are not opening quickly enough for me to get into the why that was the case. But before I do, or as I'm struggling rather to do that, Mpiyakhe, let me throw it at you here, insofar as there's a broader issue here, really. On the one hand, the inability of the state to consult with various stakeholders in any given industry around how people should be legislated or governed, rather. I mean, for example, as soon as this court case came through, the Road Freight Association, these are the truckers and the like, basically said, yeah, we endorse this. We endorse the fact that the legislation has been struck down. AARTO, of course, is also made up of various bodies that operate in this particular sector. Again, that lack of consultation and really the rule by force that the state has tried to impose.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Sihle. And I guess it has something to do with the first two letters of AARTO, which is the administrative adjudication. I mean, that just sounds like a very bad idea if you think about it. The fact that government can take away your rights to drive your car without ever seeing a judge. I mean, that was, you can see why people oppose that. I mean, like, it's one of those things like e-tolls where something is so obviously not going to be opposed because it oppresses or it violates people's rights, that government still presses with, and I would put also lockdown in that. So it was one of those things that government goes tries and do against the vast majority of South Africans whom it affects. And I think, yeah, it's just a bad sign for this government. It's a further sign of their declining legitimacy because they keep on trying to enforce these type of things. And I guess we'll keep on seeing these attempts, but the key battleground is going to be the judiciary. And I think you might touch on that, on some of the things that's been happening around the judiciary. I think that's going to be the key battleground, because the state is going to keep on trying to do this sort of thing where they try to take on more and more powers and usurp more powers, especially from the judiciary. Because if you think about it, legislative and executive powers are already united in one entity, which is the ANC, but the judicial powers are still independent. So that's going to be the battleground. And I think AARTO is a part of that. It may be a smaller part, but it's a part of that.
Absolutely. And they're very much aware of this, by the way. Often when you read a proposed bill by, politicians in government, it always defers and transfers power away from other arms of the state and tries to vest it usually into the hands of a minister. That is someone who is appointed because of their political clout and not necessarily their expertise or their ability to administer justice fairly on a given issue. Like, I don't want to waffle on this issue, guys, but I do want to give everybody an opportunity just to speak to this, because there are broader implications here. There are broader implications than just the administration of justice in the transport sector. As I read the statement from AARTO, and I want to throw this to you, Gideon, here, because there's a parallel to a large extent with the gun fight, or the fight for our gun rights, pardon me, with this particular legislation. AARTO basically said in their statement, open quote, AARTO believes that the AARTO in its current format does nothing rather to improve road safety, which is what we'd all assume was the intention of that legislation, but clearly not the outcome of it. Nor does it, as the statement continues, reduce the scourge of road fatalities in South Africa. AARTO then concluding to say, we're satisfied that the judgment will send the government back to the drawing board. This time, we trust the relevant departments will engage meaningfully with civil society to obtain our input, we, the people, and when developing such important policies for the country. One listens to this statement, Gideon, that's close quote, by the way. One listens to this statement and just thinks, well, it's really not here only. There's other aspects too of how we are governed, where we're being told that it is everything about us without us.
Well, that's exactly it. And with regards to this specific thing, look, gun laws are about control and political paranoia. This sort of law is about revenue generation, where the public is used as a cash cow to milk at the whims of the state. Now, these are the exact same arguments that the late Howard Dembowski of Justice Project SA made in his court case last year, when he took this issue on before it became law. And the ruling went entirely against him, with a panel of judges not even considering a whole bunch of his arguments. The entire hearing was via Zoom. And up until the time of his death, after multiple requests, they still had not presented him with the actual footage of the court case, of the judgment and the ruling. And the advocate for the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula, introduced himself to the panel of judges as the advocate, and I'm quoting verbatim, the advocate for Minister Veer Fokol. Now, if that doesn't elicit an image of an absolute farcical sort of judicial process, coming hot on the heels, obviously, now of the revelations from the DA, I think, that did the digging on this, about how captured senior judges are, I would like to believe that Howard Dembowski and Justice Project SA were a victim of this captured judiciary, where they had a solid case and a solid argument, where specific points were just dismissed on the most technical of counter arguments in order to prejudice the public further. So I'm very happy AARTO got this win, but this is exactly the conundrum we find ourselves in. Is we have ministers, we have portfolio committees legislating terrible laws with awful consequences. They do nothing to improve public safety, public health. They restrict freedom and they take your money. And when you try to fight these laws in court, the ruling goes against you and you're penalized with a cost order that you can't afford. That's a major problem. And I don't think enough South Africans, well, let me not blame the public for this. There is too much, pardon my French on the Sunday night, there's too much fuckery happening at government level for the ordinary person to keep track of it all. It is absolutely impossible. You don't have enough hours in the day, and we are absolutely reliant on civil rights and civic freedom organizations to do that for us. And even then, it's a major challenge.
Absolutely. I just had to quickly change my branding there because I had the wrong branding on. But no, the point you're raising, Gideon, is absolutely spot on. As I throw this to you, really as a final comment, for me, on the one hand, we've spoken about the element of the insistence by the political elites to ram through decisions onto people, whether they agree or disagree, often, without consultation whatsoever. The notion of just governing, they've eroded the notion of governing by consent, and they govern by force and threats. We've covered that issue, but there's another aspect to the ruling by the judge that I want you to touch on. Pardon me. This is Judge Anali Basson, in finding in favor of AARTO, agreeing with their position, basically said the following. One of the things she agreed with AARTO in her ruling is that the legislation unlawfully intrudes upon the exclusive executive and legislative competence of local and and provincial governments, as envisioned in the Constitution, preventing, as she put it, local and provincial governments from regulating their own affairs. This is a critical point in a time where we are having this conversation broadly around, for example, the Western Cape groupings and pockets of KZN calling for secession, or at the very least a greater federal South Africa. This is a very strong statement by the judge that actually the Constitution as it exists already speaks to a separation of those different levels of government, and by goodness, it should stay that way.
Yeah, and I have to agree with the judgment in that, part of the reason why we've got magistrate courts dotted all over the country so that they can actually exercise everyone's right to justice, right? No matter where you are, it should be easy for you to, be able to receive legal attention in a just and fair manner as outlined by the Constitution. What's happened this time around with the AARTO bill, and like Gideon mentioned, there's quite a few others. There's probably a laundry list of this. You've got policymakers effectively using their powers to try and sign into new law powers that aren't vested in them, and they're trying to basically assign additional powers to themselves. You rightly mentioned that there's no consensus in this because, again, and you've heard me say this before, these decisions are made at either Gallagher Estate or St. George Hotel between themselves. Then they walk out of there and then table policy changes that affect you and I, but they really haven't included anyone else but themselves inside of these conversations. So the bigger issue really is setting the precedent for not just AARTO, but even other things as well, to remind these policymakers that you don't actually get to empower yourselves in the way that you've been doing, particularly with state-owned entities. Someone like Claudia Motsoeneng getting into the SABC, and I think he almost quadrupled his salary within the first 6 months or something like that. So yeah, they're used to that kind of behavior and they get away with it in the SOE framework. And now they're basically overreaching and trying to do the same with the legal framework, of which they're not empowered to do that. So yeah, it's a major slap on the wrist, but yeah, I don't believe this is the last one or the only one we'll see this year. Good reminder. Maybe as a last point, there is a arrogance here in these ministers who effectively they play musical chairs in and amongst themselves. This is how you end up with Lindiwe Sisulu, who's I think a Wikipedia page probably has a table off to the right that's longer than most people's in terms of ministries she served in. It's a game of musical chairs, as we've seen before. And now you've got said ministers trying to assign themselves powers when they haven't even proven themselves competent enough to actually, exercise those powers in a responsible manner. This time around, it's a legal issue as well, but they haven't even displayed the competency to handle legal things with care, as seen with something like the e-tolls. So yeah, thumbs up to AARTO, and unfortunately, we have to rely on these civil societies to kind of always, install a brick wall in front of the gravy train of the ANC, of course.
Absolutely, and we've kind of exhausted this particular point, but I really wanted to unpack the broader political implications behind this, because for as much as AARTO has won this battle, trust you me, the war on the battle of ideas of who governs, who governs? Is it a citizenry that is empowered to engage the institutions of the state and society, and of course of their own communities for the benefit of putting in place policies that benefit them? Or is it a political elite, a small gaggle, what the left themselves, in their own words, if you listen to Marx and Marx's theory, what they call the vanguard of the proletariat, a small elite that Marx saw as being responsible for governing and making decisions on behalf of everybody, the bourgeois and the proletariat? Who governs between those two? And I think the courts, the vestiges of it that we still have that aren't captured, because I think Gideon is absolutely spot on in pointing out that, characters like the DA and Helen in particular have been pointing out that the ANC have every intention of capturing all organs of state, including the judiciary. So that question, at the very least for now, was answered by this particular judge in saying actually the citizenry govern, and the government in this case must go back to the drawing board. It is 25 minutes past 8 o'clock. This is Liberty and Friends. My name is Sisulu Ngobese, in conversation with Mpiyakhe Dlamini. There he is, right next to me on your screen. This is a chap you haven't seen for quite a while. By popular demand, he's back in the new year 2022. Hopefully we'll have him on many more episodes like this one. Welcome to it. That's Mpiyakhe Dlamini, columnist in various publications. Gideon Joubert, the head honcho over at Paratus.info. Make sure you check them out and find them on their on all their socials and their website. Indeed, in fact, I think I shared a nice piece that was on the Paratus website this week, as I was asking the question: should I get a particular gun or not once I pass my competency? Paratus.info. All of that information that can help you in that regard is on there. Great writers and contributors on that platform. And the two chaps below us right there, Koketso, Resane, and of course, Dumo, Denga from the Manpatria unit. Shout out to them, of course, and welcome to the show. We're going to keep the conversation going as we look at the news week that is. We've just covered the controversial rules that were going to govern the new driving laws and how they were declared unconstitutional. Let's move on maybe to another character this week, very controversial. Lindiwe Sisulu, indeed, Koketso in his last segment just brought her name up. Let's actually unpack this particular character. Goodness me, what a rent-seeking politician she is. She's literally the archetype political parasite, insofar as not being of use to man or beast in anything other than the political arena, because that's all she's really known her whole life. Let's unpack, therefore, her statements this week, going after the judiciary, going after the country's institutions. And it's a very important distinction here. A solid democracy, guys, Dumo, I'm going to come to you. A solid democracy is founded on institutions, not particular politicians, not strongman politics, but institutions that govern and create certainty in a nation state. And here she is, Dumo, attacking that institution, in particular, the Constitution and the judiciary.
Right. I found her statements to be very irresponsible, and I think those statements will probably resonate well within the RET faction of the ANC. And I think also, just given what she said, I think we have to be very careful, because if you look at these institutions that have been created, like the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive, they're all designed to kind of balance power. So that, as Mpiyakhe mentioned earlier, that if the judiciary is not captured, then they can at least fight the good fight. But now you look at Lindiwe Sisulu, what she has done. She has said that this constitution doesn't work for Africans. Whose law is it anyway? Like committing the genetic fallacy, like because it wasn't African, then therefore it doesn't work. I mean, like, what is she saying? I mean, the ANC has been in power for 26 years. 27 years, sorry, or 28, sorry. Well, it's over 20 years. Now, they've been in power for so long. They could have changed the constitution many times. When Mpiyakhe was in power, I mean, they didn't have like over 2/3 of the seats in parliament. They could have changed the constitution, but they didn't. I mean, only someone who is ignorant of, you know, how things work in this country would believe what Sisulu's saying. And I think also what Sisulu was trying to achieve with this is that I think she was trying to throw her hat in and say that, hey guys, I'm going to challenge Ramaphosa at the end of the year. And also at the same time, and also the timing of it is very interesting because it came after the Zondo report was released, part 1 at least. And I think at that time she was also trying to defend the ANC and make it sound like as if there are people within the judiciary who are just hunting down the ANC and, oh, the ANC, you know, the people that had 2/3 in parliament and could not even change the constitution when they wanted to are now, you know, suffering at the hands of this foreign law. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I just think for me, it's just attention seeking. But for anyone who can really critically assess that letter that she wrote, everyone will know that everyone with the brain will see that it's just hogwash. That's what I'll say.
Well, it's important to bring out also that that very same letter you're referring to, where she attacks the institutions, about 20% of it, as according to some estimates, was actually plagiarized. So it wasn't even her own words. There you go, a perfect example of what I mean when I say these people are of no use to man or beast. Outside of politics, they generally would find themselves being nobodies. But you know, there is a more serious aspect here, and I want to throw it to you, Koketso, and I'll come to you, Mpiyakhe, after that. You know, here's a woman who is clearly. Let's talk about the politics of this, guys. Here's a woman who's clearly putting her name in the ring, insofar as saying, well, at the next elective conference of the ANC, that is where they choose their leadership for the next 5 years, she would like to be, likely, given that she's putting her face out quite prominently, a contender for the ANC presidency. Now, we all know the ANC is made up of various factions. I mean, the ANC in its totality is trash. Let's not try and separate, oh, one faction is better than the other, because that's the game that the corporate media try and play. Once they've chosen their preferred candidates, of course, they'll never tell us who their preferred candidate is. But let me come back to my point, Koketso. You know, here's a woman who's clearly trying to pander and play to that radical economic transformation cabal. Lindiwe herself, in the run-up to Jacob Zuma, for example, being arrested, was very plentiful in Nkandla, being seen there as part of the rallies and basically tagging herself to being their guy or their lady, so to speak, in this regard. Pleading, here's the irony, pleading to be the pro-poor candidate as she walks through a crowd with her red-bottomed luxury shoes. Lovely, lovely irony, that one, that no one really reconciles. But Koketso, talk to us about the politics being played here.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an odd one. You'd think that someone like Lindiwe Sisulu...
Sweetie!
Okay, am I hearing things? Okay, anyway... yeah, I was about to say that you'd think that someone like Lindiwe Sisulu, who's got a Sisulu surname, you know, doesn't need to, I'd say, downgrade herself to the level of actually having to pander to the Nkandla masses, if I can put it like that. But yeah, the politics behind this really are quite interesting in that I believe this is probably the second time around she's gunning for that ANC presidency. And each time she's, whatever she's tried in the past clearly didn't work. And now realizing the popularity of someone like Nxamalala, she's trying to ride off the back of that and potentially beat someone like the EFF to it. The most astounding thing, though, with this whole thing, well, at the very least in my view, is how in her statement, plagiarized as it was, she's effectively asking judges, or let me say black judges, to look at their blackness before the actual duty of being a judge. In other words, they must actually put aside the fact that they are there to deliver a constitutional mandate according to the oath that they swear, and instead they must really look deep within themselves and have quote unquote black interest at heart and putting the law aside. Politically, this doesn't really bode well because again, it's a lot like a country leader who, you know, then wants to hang on to his country, not via the ballot box, but through the military. It's that same military that can actually take him out of power. And so what Lindiwe Sisulu is effectively trying to do by pointing out that black judges aren't acting black enough, she's basically putting herself on that side of the spectrum where anything that they do should be done because of black interests, while at the same time not specifying what these black interests are. Something like this is obviously going to bite her should it ever pass through. But the real thing here that we need to take note of is how she's actually asking black judges to put aside their constitutional mandate and actually start politicking. And that would only result in us not having a fair judiciary. That is, you and I who has to go through the court system should we be criminals in any form in any way or form, that is.
Even as you say that, pardon me, I just had to mute myself there. And before I actually chip in there, because Mpiyakhe, I want to throw it to you. There's something Koketso said that I really want us to unpack in this conversation, and we're going to offend a lot of people. So let me just say to the viewers now, gird your loins. I'm about to say something that will make some of you guys flip out. Before I do that, a reminder, please hit that like button. Hit that like button, people. I see there's almost double the initial number I cited earlier on, but the likes are nowhere near that. Make sure you hit that like button or dislike button, but show us some love here if you're enjoying the conversation. Koketso, there's a point you raised, that the likes of your Lindiwe Sisulus, the likes of your Jacob Zumas, the likes of your, broadly speaking, the political left in this country, the political left who self-describe also as being pan-Africanist in nature. So this will include EFF, AZAPO, PAC, the likes. And of course, the RET faction, the Radical Economic Transformation faction. The one thing they always trade on is this notion of them being pro-black, or that all their decisions that they make are for the benefit of black people broadly, or Africans in particular. You've heard them use that expression quite a lot. That's the intention, that is the rhetoric, that is the appearance that is sold to us. Then you start saying, okay, fine, if this is the intention, if this is the appearance, what is the outcome? Because these people have been in power for 27 years plus. What is the outcome of the said policies which we're being told are pro-black? Well, then you get the excuses. And there's two excuses, Mpiyakhe, that I want you to chew on. Number one, white monopoly capital is blocking us from achieving the socialist agenda, which is pro-black, which would basically see us take from one group and give to another. And once we give to the other, everybody is equal. And in the equality, we're all rich, right? That's the agenda. That's the argument. It's white people, or as they spell it now, YT, because that's the trendy lefty thing now. White people are doing this. Okay, that's the first excuse. Then the second excuse, when you point out... And then the second excuse, and I want you to deal with both of these, is, no, it's not so much white people, but rather we're not being given the freedom, the full freedom to roll out the policies that we want to, because one faction or the other. But in particular, they'll point to the following. They'll say, but look at the current success we've had. Look at how BEE, for example, race-based legislation where government can pick winners and losers based on race. Look at how it's created a generation, a small elite of very rich black people. You should be happy, poor black person, that these rich blacks exist. In fact, you live through us. So when we go to Konka and we go to Max's and we go to all of these nice establishments and we pop 10,000 Rand a bottle of champagne, you, the poor person, I'm going to drink it, but you swallow it. That's how it works in their mind, of course. Mpiyakhe, please, my brother, and I pray the truth will set us free. Break down to us why these two positions broadly are holding us back as a country.
Well, first of all, I was saying, first of all, leftist policies just haven't worked anywhere. I think we can safely rule those out. It's not as clear for, let's say, race, nationalist-based policies globally. But in South Africa, there's just one stat for me that makes it clear, specifically what you were referring to with BEE, where you refer to the small elite. The fact now that inequality within black people is now the greatest, the biggest driver of inequality in South Africa says it all. So the fact that South Africa is one of the most unequal countries, and the biggest driver of that inequality is inequality between black people, despite the fact that we had apartheid. So that tells you everything about the failure of BEE. And I mean, but I guess because we've seen the script when it comes to other the left-wing policies, like not specifically the race-based policies, that they will keep trying to reinvent and call it something different and find different excuses and propose fixes that won't really work. Those won't address the core problem. The core problem, as I see it with BEE, is that you are trying to subvert the two most important things any society needs: meritocracy and competition. You need those two things to have a successful society where the best people rise to the top, and everyone else has to work hard and to get to that level in order to rise to the top. So we are trying to subvert that, and we are getting the backlash. We are promoting the mediocre, the people who drink at conquer and waste money, and we are putting down the people who would actually use that capital productively. All those people who would have benefited from that. I mean, what people don't get about things like BEE, if I may just get on my soapbox a little bit, is that as a black person, in order for you to benefit from the economy, there are many ways for you to benefit. If it's a merit-driven, competitive economy, you can benefit from white people just as much as you can benefit from black people. It doesn't really doesn't factor into it, because it's all about what value you can provide to these people. Now, if you subvert an economy and make it to make it serve political interests, that's when you start to having problems. Because what you are doing now is that instead of rewarding people for the value that they produce, you are rewarding people for things like political loyalty, which are regressive in my view. Because as you can see from people like Linda Sisulu, and I think your description of her was absolutely spot on. She is nothing but a parasite. She has never added value in her entire life. For all of her life, she has only ever worked in politics, from exile, working in exile for the ANC and coming back in South Africa and becoming a member of parliament and then a minister. She has never added any value anywhere. So people like that just want to see. So what's happened there is she saw a vacuum, because there's no one really challenging Ramaphosa right now. I think his most potent opponent would probably be someone like David Mabuza, but he doesn't seem like to be in the mood to challenge him right now. And so Lindewe is taking advantage of that. And so the best way to take advantage of that is to adopt radical economic transformation policies. So you would never actually be able to tell whether she believes in them or not. I think for her, it's just the natural place to be, to oppose Ramaphosa and become in. So it's basically just, they are fighting for power. It has nothing to do with principle. It has nothing to do with our welfare. It's about them and whether they get power. So yeah, we'll see, but none of these things will ever really work. And I think for me, my focus is not really there anymore, because I think, you know, the political game is always going to play out in a specific way, and it's always going to see the same pattern, and there's never really going to be a resolution until you change the culture of the people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, the culture to a large extent follows ideas, and sometimes vice versa. And let me be precise in this particular point. Dumo, I want to throw it to you. Gideon, it'll come to you after that. You know, there's this other funny thing that we'll often hear by the so-called pro-black types. I like to call them Blavity Blacks, because after a US magazine called Blavity, which is of black millennials, all the woke nonsense that you can think of. And it trades on blackness, so-called blackness, as the foundation of their ideas. Hashtag Blavity Blacks. You know, you have these individuals, Dumo, who push these ideas, and they do so in a very condescending way, aside from how I described it earlier on. Very much, I'm seeing a lot of people bring up Animal Farm references of all of us being equal, but some being more equal than others. Let me be precise. Let me add some meat to these potatoes. The Blavity Blacks, the political elites, are happy as black people to say, no, I'm very capable. I'm where I'm at because I did, I achieved this. I went to this school. I did that. The very same things that the so-called white monopoly capital have, they had. So they had the great education, good healthcare, safety and security, you name it, the very things that we call enabling opportunities in economics. They had that by virtue of their proximity to the political elites. It's always been those blacks who are closest to politicians and closest to the political elites who do well amongst black South Africans generally. So having on the one hand said, no, I got myself here, I'm capable, I can do this. But their policies that they push, the policies that they then push into the ether, they push into the lexicon is no, those blacks are incapable. They can't, even if you gave them an education, achieve this, and that, because white people get in the way. They don't get in the way of themselves, but they get in the way of all other black people. So we push policies which therefore say no other black person outside of us, the black elite, can by effect achieve something off of their own energy with assistance, not stifling, but assistance here and there. But no one else can achieve what we've achieved, which is why they'll then advocate for things like expropriation without compensation, the NHI, or a myriad of things which take power and they take resources away from poor people, especially poor black people, and vest it into the hands of the black elite. Is it not the most condescending thing that we often hear from the elites who trade on blackness, Dumo?
Yes, it is. It is very condescending, and for the reasons that you mentioned, and also because of the fact that a lot of these political elites, they thrive off black poverty, because when black people are poor, they will try to introduce policies that keep them poor. And if black people stay poor, then they can introduce policies that make it look like as if they're going to help those poor black people. And unfortunately, what it does, it just makes them enrich themselves. It gives them more power. So the reality is that black people are just used, the poverty of black people, let me just take one step back. The black people who are poor are used as a means to achieve more power for the political elite. And this is a massive, massive problem, because a lot of people don't see that, because the moment you point it out, especially if that person is black and they point it out, they will say, no, you've been captured by white monopoly capital, or you are an agent of white supremacy and everything like that. And we're like, Aibo, we are telling you that this is not making black people rich. Oh, you don't care about black people then. They think that the policies themselves, just because they are labeled as policies that are supposed to help black people, they think it's going to help black people, but it doesn't. These policies don't. Look at the minimum wage. It literally makes young black people unemployable. I mean, if you look at the Langeberg Unemployment Forum, they keep saying, we want to at least sign an exemption so that we can actually go and get a job. We don't care if we get paid below the minimum wage. We just want a job. And those black people are ignored. They're totally ignored because according to the elites, they're not in line with the narrative. And this is dangerous, because a lot of people in the middle class, they just take what the government says and they take it as truth. And one last thing is that, another thing, when I criticize these policies, a lot of them will say, no, Dumo, it's because you're privileged. And I'm like, really? I'm not the one who can sign stuff into law. I mean, I'm just a guy on the internet telling you that these things are bad. I can't sign anything into law. I don't have that type of power. So the people that they're supporting, they have more privilege than me. So maybe you should question them. Maybe their privilege is, blinding them from the actual realities that are occurring on the ground. Maybe. Who knows?
Oh. And again, even as we frame it this way, guys, and as the conversation, it's critically important, and it's one which we need to have as South Africans, quite frankly. And let me share why. As I throw it to you, Gideon, we're in a very unique space right now as South Africans, where a good proportion of the voting majority in this country have already expressed, okay, we're sick of the ANC like you are. What now? What now? People are saying it's that what now moment. And this is why we've been saying, for example, for a very long time, a battle of ideas is going to be absolutely critical insofar as going into these communities, broadcasting as we do in our various platforms and our various shows and our various strengths, in my case, in some cases, physically going into communities to engage people on these ideas. That's the what now moment. But the quality of the ideas are critically important. You know, Gideon, and I want to throw it to you in this regard. There is something to be said for me. Sorry, I'm trapped by my own sentence construction here. Let me take a step back. I think the biggest discussion and the talking point that we need to win, insofar as those of us who are on the liberty side of things, is the notion that actually, dear citizen, black, white, Indian, colored, or whatever the case may be, but particularly when the poor black individual, the chap who lives in a shack on a sand dune in Lamontville or in Cape Town, whatever, understand the following. Government is not your friend. Cyril Ramaphosa is not your father to have a family meeting with. That actually your life and your opportunities in life would be far more enhanced if you were given the freedom, the liberty to pursue your happiness. And at best, for those of us who are at the bottom rung, assistance from the state, not by way of the state doing something by you, no, but rather the state putting the resources that it would have otherwise used to do something for you into your hands directly, whether that's on education, healthcare, safety and security, the resource into your hands directly. For example, an education voucher is one example. That's the fight, isn't it, Gideon?
That is the fight, and that's the hardest one in the sense that I've said it several times, and it's something that I'm sometimes a bit unpopular for. As I said, the true legacy of apartheid was breeding civil dependence on the state. And the ANC government took the reins in 1994. We became a democratic republic, and we just continued on that track, and we enhanced it and we grew it. And whether or not it was by design, intent, or just coincidence, we now have more people dependent on state handouts than ever before. And it's a very perverse power relationship in the sense that you are an adult, free citizen, but you cannot provide for your family or yourself. You're dependent on Big Daddy government to give you a grant every month. It's humiliating, it's disempowering, it's infantilizing, and it is a crime, in my opinion. There's no other way to put it. And while the government institutions were still working, while you still had a semblance of state healthcare that was to some degree effective, and state schooling that was to some degree effective, and infrastructure like rail and road that to some degree still kind of worked, even though not perfectly and sometimes very suboptimally, you still had that sort of functionality to a degree. And this is where my most contrarian take probably comes in. This is where Jacob Zuma was a godsend for us. This is where the current crisis is a godsend for us, because it has accelerated the decay of these institutions that were on a downward trajectory anyway. I'm convinced they were. And it's happened at such a fast pace and so shockingly that people cannot adapt their expectations. You can't lower your expectations fast enough in this case, in the sense the hits keep on coming and the shocks to your system keep on coming. And there is an awakening in that, in the sense that you go, but hang on, I'm being lied to. I've been lied to for you've been lied to for far longer than 3 decades, but you've been lied to for essentially nearly 3 decades of democracy. Everything is getting worse, and you can see it around you and say, but there are communities taking ownership of this crisis that are beginning to make plans and do things for themselves, and they are surviving and they're flourishing. Maybe I should do the same. So this idea of liberty, this idea of individual resilience, of state proofing, of it, becoming an active citizen, it's an idea whose time has definitely come right now. We are living in that transition from being state dependent to being state proof as we speak. And because it's an idea we can't force issue. I agree. We need to go out there. We need to speak to communities. We need to expose them to these ideas, and we need to help them structure their thoughts around it wherever possible. But it's an idea we cannot possibly force, but it is one that people are embracing anyway. And I'm hoping to see a lot more of that, because that is our future. Our future is away from the state providing, because it can't. Even if the DA took over tomorrow, the Republic of South Africa is so irreparably fucked that it would take generations and foreign direct investment and borrowing of money that's of astronomical amounts to just recover what's lost, let alone expand upon it. It's up to us to carry the flame forward and seize our own destiny.
Absolutely, absolutely. Guys, welcome to it. If you've just joined us, I see our numbers have grown. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends, your Sunday evening news week wrapping up show. That didn't sound right. Your week ending news roundup show. There we go. That sounds a little better. My name is Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty, in conversation with Mpiyakhe Dlamini, independent columnist. You'll find all his content on various spaces, from the Daily Friend to I think some of the Sunday papers. I'll let Mpiyakhe get into that a bit later. Gideon, Joubert, of course, the host of Paratus.info, Dumo, Denga, and Koketso, Resane, the chaps from the Manpatria show. Welcome to it. We've just concluded this segment of the conversation, which I really think, I will throw it to everybody. I don't want us to be like very robotic. I think this conversation is an important one because it touches on so many areas, guys, which you also will find were indicative of some of the top headlines that I was going to raise anyway from this week. Let me raise a quick one here, which I think spoke to what we saw this week about the notion once again of, how far do we allow government to get into the way of something? I want to bring up a chap here, a certain Serbian chap. I hear he's very good at tennis. I'm not sure. Some say he's the #1 in the world. But anyway, a certain chap who, I don't care where you stand on the issue. It has to be said, whether you like it or not, this guy stood up to a state mechanism, a whole government, the merits of which might be wrong or right, but he stood up to a government which, for a lot of people, millions of citizens of that particular country itself, that is Australia. Let me stop speaking about them in a very cryptic way. I'm talking about Australia here. It seems as though Australians themselves have almost resigned themselves to big daddy government, govern me harder daddy type stuff. And here comes the Serbian with a racket in the hand and a tennis ball in the other, who literally serves up a dish of anti-statist, anti-authoritarian takes around a particular grift. I can't name it, unfortunately, on the show because I'm already on strike 2. But a certain grift of a certain spicy cough stands up to this thing and says, no, you can't treat people in this particular way. We have rights, damn it. And in us having rights, I should be able to come into your country freely, obviously following the rules, but come into your country freely and play. And if anything, your citizens should be in the same place. But instead of being angry at the government, guys, we have citizens literally being angry at the Serbian tennis player. Koketso, what is going on here? What are we seeing here? Is there a mass, wow, I nearly used a particular expression that went viral, but is there a mass psychosis of sorts that is seeing some people basically say, you know what, maybe it is government's place to tell us where we can and can't be?
So this is an odd one because there's obviously, well, from what we've seen in the past couple of years at the least, there's clearly two types of citizens, those who want to essentially take control of their own lives and those who are more than willing to actually delegate critical life decisions to someone else, aka Big Daddy government, like Gideon said. And it's the latter that, when they do this, they almost absolve themselves of their own personal responsibility in terms of their own life. But the real bigotry here is how they expect that kind of behavior from anyone else. Kind of a little bit like if I support a particular sports team, who am I to be angry at others for supporting other teams? Who am I to then prescribe to others how they must think or what they must do? That's what we find ourselves in. But with this particular tennis player, right, the interesting thing here is that he hasn't actually confirmed whether he's done A or B, if I can put it like that. He hasn't confirmed that. Essentially, he's refusing to disclose his vaccination status. And that's what kind of started this whole thing here. And yeah, again, because he hasn't disclosed it publicly, probably has privately, of course, to friends. That's really that's really the hot topic here. So it's not that he is actively, being an anarchist, or trying to not to let me say go against what governments are mandating the world over. It's not that. He's simply saying that my personal health decisions are exactly that. They're mine. It's not for you to ask. It's not for me to tell. It's not for you to instruct me to tell. And it's not for you to actually put it inside of a law to mandate me to tell either. Now, going back to my my initial example here of these two types of citizens, right? So obviously those who understand that, listen, let me make my own life choices, not just me, but that of my children, they're obviously now in favor of what this tennis player is doing, because, let's not forget, he's there to play tennis. He's not there to make political statements. He's not there to, let me say, campaign for a certain narrative or anything like that. His profession is being a tennis player, of which he's, rated the best in the world. He's actually on the verge of breaking a few records as well. He's literally one tournament away. So this is someone who's actually worked very hard to get where they are. This individual is in the 1% of the 1%. All he wants to do is play tennis at the same tournament in the same venue that he's done a number of times before and actually come out with the win. He's not politicizing anything. But unfortunately, he's been dragged into this by people who would rather delegate responsibilities for their own life to Big Daddy government. And him not doing the same is somehow causing, a bit of a, I'd say a bit of a, I don't even know the word now for it. But this is where we find ourselves right now. And I think I've mentioned this before. Best case scenario would be, since he's now apparently being deported again through another round of court dates and court trials, I would actually love to see how, I'd love to see other players actually saying, listen, I stand with Djokovic, and if you won't let him play, then I will put down my record and stand with him and not play, regardless of how whatever reason is used for him not to play. That's the best case scenario for me, and perhaps we needed an event like this to actually wake the rest of the world up, to remind us that a lot of what's going on worldwide has nothing to do with the original concern of a particular virus, of course.
Where, my man, that beta male simp soy boy, Rafael Nadal, has already said, nah, he already understood the rules, no? Everybody had the rules. He not listened to the rules. So consequences. I'm like, listen to this beta male, literally simp for the Australian government. Hey, man, Rafael Nadal, if you're listening, you can slide up and down that pole as much as you want. The Australian government is not going to stuff that $10 bill into your panties, homie. Anyway, moving on. I'm sorry.
He should take his pension and his prune juice and sit down.
But actually, I was going to come to you, Gideon, because, for me, there's a very important point that Koketso raised here, which is actually my health status, guys. It's such a basic in a functional democracy. It used to be my health status is for me to worry about. It's for me to know. Why should I have to report to a Big Daddy government? I should stop saying this because at some stage I'll be like, hey guys, welcome to the Big Daddy government show. But, it is an important distinction to make. It is an important thing to actually fight for, to say there are certain things, there are certain rights and liberties I have that are God-given, or they're natural rights. They're not given to me by some government official.
Well, this is the thing, right? And I mean, I don't think anyone who's been paying attention to what Australia has become over the past 30 years, meaning a interventionist, nanny state, busybody hellhole, would be surprised as to what's happened. I mean, they are particularly obsessed and very particular about you better fill in their little immigration forms correctly, while at the same time they're selling their country to China and kowtowing to the Communist Party's whims. It's a schizophrenic, unhealthy state of being, and this is what happens when you defer personal choice, personal responsibility, your own involvement in governance to more and more committees and to more elected and unelected officials, and you get government bigger, you grow this governmental bureaucracy into this machine that can make decisions by a committee, and in the space of a few decades, you find yourself as the average citizen downstream of that, completely disempowered, that you're no longer a citizen, you're really just a subject to this machine you've built. And I think Australia is a beautiful example of a soft, that's actually a hard tyranny. If you look at the way that their police, their security forces treat people who are doing things that are completely normal being walking around without wearing face masks, not wanting to inject themselves with pharmaceuticals, not wanting to share information pertaining which pharmaceutical products they use. These are all normal things. And you have thugs in uniforms with bulletproof vests and guns and truncheons get up in your face about it. That's, that is a fascist wet dream come true right there. And that's unfortunately where we are. And how do we get Australia, guys? You get Australia by being apathetic. I've said it several times. Apathy from citizens is a far greater threat to democracy and freedom than any tyrannical government can be. And there, you look at Australia, Canada, New Zealand, jeepers, most of the Anglosphere world, and obviously Germany and Austria have returned to fascist roots. They've rewound the clock 100 years. That's the price you pay for being uninvolved in your own governance.
And it's very scary because it came down, Mpiyakhe, to eventually the Australian government saying, as in, stuff it. We're not even going to try and make up a valid excuse, especially when they lost that first round in court. And the second reason for basically deporting this guy or revoking his visa as well, he might spur a unrest in the country. So that's maybe the reason why we need to get rid of this guy. Yes, it fundamentally erodes that notion of government action having to be rational, fair, and based on logic.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. It's completely arbitrary. This is the opposite of the rule of law. So I expect the courts to strike this latest visa withdrawal down again. I don't expect it to stand. I think everyone in the world right now should be standing with Novak, whether you are pro or anti-vax. I think if we all care about freedom, this is our issue. We should all be saying we are behind Novak 100%. What concerns me is everyone who's like almost normal people who seem almost gleeful that this guy is being treated this way, because it sort of validates their like what has happened to them since this entire thing started, the lockdowns and everything, the loss of freedom. So it's almost like a weird form of Stockholm syndrome where because I have suffered, then everyone else should suffer and no one should get a reprieve. You know what it reminds me of? It's like in South Africa, when someone complains about taxi owners not paying taxes, it reminds me of that actually. It's because it's like if I'm oppressed, then everyone must be oppressed. I can't be the only one who's oppressed. So I think the same is happening. And that's why the people of Australia, a lot of them are so invested in seeing this guy not being able to play tennis, which is the in the world now. I think he's the best since I think Roger and Nadal have retired, so he's definitely the best among the men. So it's
absolutely
so it's just well, I don't want to be too harsh, but like people like ordinary people like me, people who are part of the middle class, like nameless, faceless people, millions of us across the world, people who just want to exercise a little power against this guy and make him feel like he's doing something evil because he's not complying with what they complied with. That's what's happening. It's the worst of us, not the best of us. The best of us would be standing for all our rights and saying this guy is standing for. I don't want the government to oppress this guy, whether I like him or not, because if they oppress him, if they oppress Novak, they can oppress me. Well, no matter how rich he is or anything like that, it doesn't matter. If they can oppress him, they can oppress me, so I will defend him. So that's what I would like to see, but it's not going to happen yet because, human psychology is a weird thing,
And, even as I throw it to you, Dumo, just to conclude, yes, Mpiyakhe raises that important point of a citizenry who themselves have been abused, have been painted black, have been dragged through the mud, and as Gideon pointed out, have also been frightened because it's very scary to have men with guns. In fact, the only men with guns in your society, because they've been disarmed as a citizenry. It's very scary when those men with guns
never give up your guns.
Absolutely. Never. Absolutely. But it's gotten to a point, therefore, for Australians, where those same guys with guns, the only ones who have the guns, are coming and telling you that, no, you can't do the most basic and mundane things, the ordinary things, unless you get permission from me, the state official, me, the guy with the gun. So, of course, those people, having not had the bravery to face their own government, would then turn to the one guy who is standing up, albeit unwittingly, albeit, as Koketso said, not out of choice, because he's not a politician. He wasn't there to make a political point. Of course, they'll go after the guy, number one. Number two, you then listen to, if I write on Mpiyakhe's point, the glee that some people have seeing this happen to what's his name, Novak Djokovic. There's this refuge now that the scoundrels have settled on to say, well, you know, he lied on his visa forms when he was asked the question, has he traveled somewhere in the last 14 days? He said no, but we know he went to Spain. And then I come back and I say, but guys, let's take a moment here. On any normal given day, that's not something which, if you were just to explain and say, look, sorry, this is an error XYZ, what can I do to fix it? That would have seen you be deported for that. So clearly this has been a personal vendetta, and really politicians who were very afraid of the message that this guy could have sent, or the message his bravery could have sent to their own citizens.
Exactly. I think, first of all, with Australia, I mean, if they put this much effort into their rugby, maybe they would have won a World Cup, because the last time they won it was like in '99. So maybe they should do that, because really, I mean, we're not that oppressive, but we're producing champions. Honestly, Australia, know that honestly, they suck.
They'll come after you.
They suck, honestly. I mean, I had friends that moved there, and, you know, I bet some of them are calling them now, like, hey, bro, are you allowed to go outside? Like, you know, that type of thing. But anyway, but on Mpiyakhe's point and your point as well, I think, you know, the government of Australia was trying to make an example out of Djokovic. Djokovic did what he was supposed to do. Remember, he wanted to get an exemption visa, and he applied for it. He did everything. And then the first incident, when he came in and they struck it down, when they canceled his visa for the first time and he went to court, the judge said he did everything. What more is he supposed to do? Everything that you asked of him, he did it. So then now, then he turns it over. Then he turns over the decision. Then now, again, I heard today that now, then the court, not the court, sorry, then the government released some statement saying that, look, he can't play because of some silly reason, and then he tried to challenge that in court, and then look what happened. Now they didn't strike it down again. They upheld the decision held by the government. And for me, and their reason was that, well, you can't challenge that final decision. And that for me just shows that the rule of law is getting eroded there, because of the fact that that should be challenged. Djokovic does not present any threat to the Australians at all, and there was and in fact I don't even think that the exemption pass was even correct to have one in the first place. But that's just my opinion. And then you got like people actually celebrating, saying, yeah, go back, Novak, like, and I'm like, bruh, don't you get it? Like, these guys are exercising powers that they can exercise on you. And this is why I'm a libertarian. Libertarians always say that we should place strong limits on coercion. And you can see the Australian government, there are very little limits on their coercion. And now, as Gideon mentioned, there's a lot of apathy from the population. The same with their apathy with regards to rugby as well. And that's why they're performing badly and stuff like that. But that apathy is dangerous. And now I think for me, I haven't seen any massive protest blow out in favor of Djokovic, but I've seen like little isolated incidents where, people have stood up to the police as well, which I find encouraging. But, the reality is that the Australian government is becoming like the CCP. if anyone tries to protest, they'll try to shut it down and use their guns. And that's what happens, guys. You know, as Gideon said, don't give away your guns, don't give away your freedoms. Because the moment you do that, you're going to work extremely hard to get them back. And even if you do, you might even get a fraction of it back. You know, so I think this is a warning to people around the world. Guys, when the government tries to interfere, you know, you have to fight.
Absolutely. And guys, I must move us on. We're in the final 18 minutes or so of the show. Welcome to it. This is eLiberty and Friends. Please make sure you hit that like button if you're enjoying this conversation. We're nearly at the usual threshold, my 50% threshold. Hit that like button, please, and let's allow us to cook with grease in the last 18 minutes or so, of the show. Fellas, I must move us on to two quick issues, one which we'll just quickly glance by, and the last one, which actually both of them are quite quick. This week we saw an extension. Speaking about government extending its powers, we saw a one Nkosazana Buffalo Bill Dlamini-Zuma, the Minister of Cooperative Governance in the country, appear before our screens once again in that dull, monotone voice. Yes, we are extending the state of disaster until February, mid-February. Suck it, bitches. That's literally what your favorite Buffalo Bill literally said. And Buffalo Bill, for those who are wondering, is a character from a very famous movie, The Silence of the Lambs, who literally was a serial killer. In this case, Nkosazana is a serial killer of our economy and kept her victims in a basement, asking them to put the lotion on their skin or else it gets the hose again. Put that mask on you or you get the lockdown again. Guys, we're in a very terrible situation in that regard, in the sense that a small gaggle, a small elite of politicians, this National Coronavirus Command Council, led by Cyril Ramaphosa and, of course, Buffalo Bill, insofar as she's responsible for extending the state of disaster. This time around, Mpiyakhe, people ask themselves the question, why? Why, though? The spicy cough is nowhere near being a problem anymore. It's clearly become endemic. And please don't say the C word, just say spicy cough. The spicy cough has become endemic. Surely we need to live and live with the virus and deal with this issue. In fact, the own Minister of Health has conceded as much.
Yeah, exactly. And what's left now is to basically just allow, let's say, the formal parts of the South African economy to go back to operating as they were before 2020, because everyone else is no longer in a pandemic. It's only the formal parts of the economy, the ones that are regulated. That's who's still following these regulations. Like for even the cops, that's the funniest thing. The police don't care anymore. They don't care about the mask mandates. They don't care. They don't care about all of these things. So I think it's I think it's just time. I think everyone is. It just goes to show you how stupid politicians can be. It's clearly harming them at this point more than it's helping them. If you just look at how badly the ANC is doing in terms of its electoral performance and everything else, surely they can see that lockdown and this state of disaster is part of that. It's not everything, because there are other things that the ANC has done wrong. There's all of the corruption and everything, but the lockdown is definitely part of it. So seeing that, you think that they would end this thing now and try to start winning back some trust from South Africans, but they are not trying to do that for some reason, which is interesting. But yeah, man, I don't know what's going to happen. So, but this must end, and I'm acting in my life more or less as it has ended. And luckily, the people I interact with are in the same mindset, so I'm not violating anyone's natural rights. There's consent all around. If I want to go into someone's shop and they require a mask, I put on a mask. If they require me to sanitize my hands, that's what I do. It's your private property. I will respect you, but on my property, like it's funny, like those delivery guys that sometimes come and things like that. So go, you want to put on a mask? I'm like, no, I'm fine. So it's, I think we're now. We can be free, but they won't allow us to be, because power is so irresistible for politicians.
Absolutely.
They have this power over us, the ability to deploy the army anytime. And I think this is starting to become a reflection of Ramaphosa's paranoia right now, because he's a man under siege. So he wants that ability to be able to deploy troops on the streets anytime. He's scared of Jacob Zuma and what he might do next. So he wants these powers. So I think we're potentially seeing the manifestation of a one man's trauma more than a response to a disease at this point. Because I think last year already, June or thereabouts, I think the government had already decided that pandemic is over because they had seen the harm it was doing to them politically. But I think because of the problems he has caused for himself, President Ramaphosa has to keep this lockdown because he needs the power. Because if he doesn't have the power, then something might happen to him, which is bad for us. Because if he has all this power, then we are not safe. Our rights are not safe. But it is what it is.
And Mpiyakhe is spot on with Gideon, because in fact, I must be frank, I made this point in vlog 124, my most recent vlog, and I said, actually, what you need to be very careful of is that this latest extension, and indeed the previous ones too, but this one in particular, that even had the mainstream media questioning it. You always know the edifice is over when your chums in the corporate media are questioning your decisions. But anyway, I contended, and I want to put this to you, that they're extending this only as a function of buying themselves time to figure out how many of these states of disaster powers can they, outside of a state of disaster, transfer into everyday normal society, so to speak. Hence, you'll hear these talks of a new normal and all of that nonsense. And in the case of Mpiyakhe, as he raised it, the prospect of being able, in a whim, to whip up the security state in a fear of, let's say, a political opponent or whatever the case may be.
Well, that's exactly it. ANC is at its weakest, I think it's historically ever been. I mean, Charlotte Maxeke Hospital nearly burnt down, Parliament burnt down, 1,000 military vehicles burnt out in a depot felt fire last year, which was more military material destroyed in one brush fire than during the entirety of the border war from 1965 to 1989. This administration, for want of a better word, because the ANC don't administer anything, but let's just call it that for the sake of convenience, has been plagued by criminal scandal upon criminal scandal so numerous that it's impossible to keep track of them all. And something that a lot of us pointed out in the very beginning with the state of disaster is there is no exit clause to this. And I like the DA, but I have to bash them on this. We warned you guys when you started giving them the level, the idea to do different levels of lockdown, when you jumped, sort of bent over backwards to give the ANC good ideas pertaining to how to handle this thing, that you are leading us down a road where you are not driving with your brights on, and there's a big bloody trap at the end of it, and you are waltzing us all merrily like Little Red Riding Hood straight into the witch's oven. And I know I mixed up my fairy tales there, but that's not the point. The fact is, we are now stuck in this predicament. What exactly stops NDZ from perpetually rolling this over? The only thing that stops it is when eventually civil society gets so tired of it that there is a credible threat of significant upheaval. She's an old bloody octogenarian thing, and we would all be better off if she just choked on a prune and died tomorrow morning. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, likely. But the fact is, Ramaphosa is weak. She undermines him at every turn. The National Corona Command Council is the council that rules us with an iron fist, and they're not going to let go. And we can write editorials about it. We can jump up and down on the ashes of the National Assembly. The opposition parties can write opinion pieces. It's not going to change anything. There needs to be meaningful action taken. And whether or not the courts are going to be courageous enough to end it, I don't know. They're so captured and they're so cowardly for the most part. I wouldn't bet my life savings, what little remains of it, on a court saving us here. This is where it comes down to citizens to actually wake up, smell the coffee, realize you are being, exactly as you described, this is the last throw of the dice. This is the Rubicon for the ANC, because it's over for them in 2024. Unless I miss the bet completely, they need this to start rushing things through for their National Democratic Revolution plan. And this is a godsend for them in order to try that last gamble. and it's really up to us to stop it.
And Koketso, that really is the bottom line, though, isn't it? It seems as though, if I can just echo the point that Mpiyakhe made, I mean, today, guys, I live in Mlazi, my home township. I'm here at the moment. And even when I go to my farm, I won't name where that is, but anyway, even when I go to my farm, I can tell you now, no one is following these lockdown regulations. It just, I mean, they'll follow the more rational stuff, like keeping distance or blah, blah, blah. But beyond that, no one is following the spicy cough grift, so to speak. And worse yet, it's now beginning to filter into those formal parts of the economy. The informal economy got the memo a long time ago. Stop following this nonsense. But in my township, there's a certain mall. I won't name it because if I do, I know people are going to start reporting it. And yeah, there's a certain mall where really, if you want, you can walk right past security without a mask. You can enter any shop you want without a mask. In fact, some staff members, when I put on a mask for a certain medical side of it, they're like, no, dog, you can take that off. The grift is over. And I was so surprised. I was so shocked. I was like, really? I actually had like a little Indian tear come down my face. But it does seem as though there's a recognition, but slowly but surely, actually, you know what? The sensible stuff will keep. The irrational stuff, no. We're done with that. And to hell with these politicians, if anything. But sorry, Koketso, I got lost in that little example. The point I was getting at is this whole thing ends when finally the middle class and the elites stop listening to their political friends and they themselves grow a backbone and say enough.
Yeah, I'm going to come out and say that
corporates, actually. And corporates.
Corporates, of course, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to come out and say that I'm giving government we still in Jan. I'm giving them until August, as in the final deadline for them to actually scrap all of this. There's a very interesting thing when this gazette came out a couple of days ago about the state of disaster being extended. So usually, I don't know if you guys have been following, but they would extend the state of disaster and then kind of give a reasoning as to why. Typically, fourth wave, third wave, a new variant, etc., etc., etc. This time around, I actually opened it here because, very short. I mean, this is, literally, this is literally 3-4 paragraphs. And the official reasoning here is I'm just reading it off the screen here, to mitigate against the impact of the disaster on lives and livelihoods. That's the reasoning provided for why the state of disaster was extended. I'm reading this off the government's website, by the way. If anyone wants to, if anyone wants to challenge me on that,
share the link. Share the link. I want to see this. This is a joke, bro.
Yeah, I'm pasting it in the chat here real quick. But yeah, so let me read that again, right? The extension takes into account the need to continue augmenting the existing legislation and contingency arrangements undertaken by organs of state and all other role players to mitigate against the impact of the disaster on lives and livelihoods. So they've extended the state of disaster to mitigate against the impact of the disaster on lives and livelihoods. Basically, we've been twiddling our thumbs for the past few months, for over a year. So we're going to extend the state of disaster by a little bit more so we can actually now start putting our heads together. So who are these heads? Just a reminder of who actually sits on this NCCC. It's, of course, Cogta Minister who's heading it, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. The South African Police, Begicele, useless. Justice Department, I think that's Lamola's department, right? Useless. And Joe Patla, Health Minister, who's basically, I don't want to call him useless. He hasn't fully proven his usefulness or uselessness at this time. But let's not forget what his predecessor did with the powers vested in him. Zweli Mkhize, useless. And then, I believe the education department is in there as well, which, I think we'll all agree here as well. Completely useless or over and above that. So, these people have extended the state of disaster, given very vague and very lax reasoning. But if you look at the people who, collectively came with this idea to extend it yet again, even their own reason speaks to the fact that not just the informal sector and the middle class, but even the government actually can't pen a reason as to why this grift must continue. And you're seeing that in the official statement available on the government website as to why they're extending it. So yeah, I'm giving them until August before the water starts boiling a bit too much or starts boiling enough that the lid will come off.
We have run out of time. Let me just quickly thank you all for joining. Before I let you guys go, as always, I give you the final word. Let us know how we can firstly find you, if you want to be found, of course, or at the very least, how we can find your content that you're putting out and what we can look forward to in the week ahead. Let me begin with you, Dumo. Manpatria, what can we expect?
Okay, so tomorrow we're going to have a podcast live in the evening at 7 o'clock, and I'll also be releasing an article in the morning at 8 a.m. It's about the non-aggression principle and gender-based violence. So head over to manpatria.com if you want to check that out. Manpatria.com.
My apologies there. My sound failed me for a moment. Koketso, I must come to you. I know there was an essay you were working on. I don't know if you were looking to release that anytime soon, but what can we expect from Koketso?
Yeah, so I'll be with Dumo tomorrow evening on the Manpatria podcast. I've taken down my website. I've started writing quite a bit. So yeah, I'm going to be writing a lot more regularly under my website and some other platforms. So again, if you want me to write for you, just give me a shout on there. But yeah, I've taken down my website so I can quadruple security around it, because yeah, it seems like there's quite a few people who want to come after me. So yeah, I've taken it down. I'm going to quadruple security, and then everything is going to go back up again. So I expect to see some content from me as of the 1st of February this coming in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I know that feeling. Same issues on this side. So I might actually consult you for some advice on how to improve my own stuff, especially as we rebrand the Big Daddy Liberty Show. More on that a bit later. Gideon, Paratus, what can we expect? What's going on?
So you can find me on the twatters at Paratus 2014. You can also find my website, which is paratus.info. What I've got coming up, not so much. Well, I'm busy with a piece for the Daily Friend that will hopefully run next week if I can get over my writer's block and actually make my paragraphs flow and not bore the audience and the readers to death, which is a major problem for me right now. I'm bringing up 2 training courses for those who are interested, pertaining self-defense and firearms, one running in the Cape last weekend of Feb, and then second or third weekend in March in Pretoria, coming up to Joubert for my quarterly, not to Joburg, coming to Pretoria, coming to Gauteng for my quarterly GP visit. And details will be published on my platforms. I've also got the Facebook page, so you can keep track of what I'm doing there, and hopefully get to do more shows like this. I'm on High FM tomorrow morning, 7:22 with Howard Feldman talking about the gun stolen from Norwood Police Station. So yeah, that's where you can catch me in the immediate and interim term.
Indeed, and we forgot to raise that. Wow, actually, I don't know why I forgot about that, especially because I'll be moving to Norwood. I'll be based there.
Busy
for my religious studies.
Very busy stream.
Very frightening. It's what makes it worse for me, and I'm sorry we ran out of time, but what makes it worse for me is that both areas that I'll be living in technically have seen a loss of either a firearms or ammunition. I've told you the story already of the stolen ammunition here in Durban and how we hear it nearly every evening here in my area, including grenades, by the way, which are up for sale in parts of my township. But anyway, that's a story for another day. Mpiyakhe, how do the folks hear from you, Buti? What can we expect And how can they find this?
So I have a column every 2 weeks with Rapport, so you can check that out. It comes out every fortnight on Sundays. Not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday after that one. There'll be something on there. And apart from that, I've really been focusing more like on investing and things like that. So I have a Substack now. It's I write there irregularly. I don't write regularly at all. But when the mood hits me, I do write on that. So you can check that out on eeworld.substack.com.
Very, very, very nice. And of course, Mpiyakhe, do not fret, dear viewers. Is someone who I will continue to try and have on the show on a somewhat regular basis, as and when he is available. I'm really appreciative to Mpiyakhe and all of you guys for having joined us on the show. That is, of course, Mpiyakhe Dlamini, Koketso, Resane, Gideon, Joubert, and of course, Dumo from the Manpatria team. And thank you, by the way, for watching the show. Thank you for being a part of my journey here on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Guys, we are doing some hectic background work to try and make this channel a bit more on the smoother, legit side of things. So trust you me, lots more content coming your way. In fact, we are building, I mentioned just now that I'll be moving back to Johannesburg. I'll be between there and my farm here in KZN more. And we're going to be a lot more fixed in place as we build a tiny studio to broadcast from in Johannesburg. So that's what I'm working on in the background. If you don't see me posting often, it's because that is the reason. Expect that to be ready sometime in March or April, but lots of interesting stuff ahead of that coming your way. As always, you'll see me every Wednesday for the Big Daddy Liberty Show, vlogs every now and then, and of course on Sundays for Liberty and Friends. So with that being said, let me say once again, thank you for watching. If you want to support the work of BDL, those details are in the descriptor of the video. Guys, as little as $50 a month, it goes a long way in helping me get around the country and to do this work. So thank you very much for those who do support the show. At some stage, I'm going to have a special show where I just say thank you to you guys. You have been literally the backbone of the show. And as 2022 starts, hopefully you guys will walk with me on this journey. So with that being said, good evening. Thank you very much. And a reminder, as I say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.